talk through some of the ways EOS is innovating. Maybe just to get things kicked off, we can do a couple introductions. I will be moderating the conversation today. As mentioned by Claire, I'm Nich Weinheimer. I lead the commerce practice at Kenshoo. Kenshoo, excitingly, actually, we're coming out with some news around our whole branding tomorrow, so I won't jump the gun, but we are a technology company with 15 years experience bringing enterprise advertising technology to the market across search and social as those channels came to life over the years. And then over the last 4 years or so, leading kind of the boom in retail media from a technology perspective. On the heels of an acquisition at the end of last year of a company called Signals Analytics, we now are playing very heavily in the data intelligence space, aggregating thousands of disparate market intelligence data sources across everything from key opinion leaders to retail price and selection across all major retailers, IP filings, all of this data compiled into a data platform to augment and help brands think through their kind of full circle go-to-market. So that's the background of our company. We're very excited about seeing how brands are innovating and thinking through their kind of whole full circle go-to-market. In our prep conversation, I heard a lot about what Soyoung and team are doing. So Soyoung, maybe I will hand it to you for an introduction.
Sure. I first of all, I feel like with that intro, I should be like interviewing you and asking you the questions about like insights and data and intelligence, but I'll do my best to keep up. So I'm Soyoung Kang. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at EOS Products. We are a privately held personal care company. We are most famous for our iconic lip care portfolio. I've been in this role now for about 3 years, and I oversee I think the traditional suite of marketing media across paid, owned, and earned, but I also oversee our product innovation function and creative teams as well.
It's a perfect role to be playing when we're having conversations like this. So again, thank you for joining. I just out of my own story in engaging with your brands, back when we went to big conferences, which I do kind of miss. I told you how much I miss travel in the past, but it's changing a little bit now. I would always go around to all the booths that had the EOS balls, and that's what I would bring back as my gifts to my now wife, then girlfriend. So maybe it was because of your products that we did get married. I don't know. That's TBD. But
I'd like to take credit for that. Yeah,
I'm sure there's a wide array of products that you guys have. Maybe you can give us a little bit of context on sort of the type of brand that EOS is, and sort of we talked a little bit in our prep conversation around the the challenges that as you think about innovating in a space that especially with the types of products that you're not necessarily kind of the major consideration type brand. I think you'd mentioned in terms of how folks come about finding your products. So maybe you can give us a little context on that background and how some of those challenges that you face.
Yeah, and I think EOS I think is viewed as a relatively young brand, and we've been around for about 12 years, and we first launched with our lip care product in the drug channel, and we are still predominantly what I would say the majority of our business is driven out of brick and mortar retail sales. Obviously, we have evolved with the times as well, and we have expanded out our e-commerce footprint, both in terms of our direct owned e-commerce as well as our third party and wholesale e-commerce business. And then the past year, like it has for many businesses, has really accelerated that the increase in penetration of e-commerce to our total business. On the marketing side, though, what's really interesting is that because we've always appealed to and marketed to a younger consumer, we adopted digital marketing and media much earlier on. And so we've actually been predominantly digital media focused, as well as like what I would call social media first from a strategy perspective for several years now. And I've been with the brand for 3 years. So, during the course of the past 3 years, we've been like 100% digital and social. And so in some ways, while our business footprint and sort of like where the magic happens from a revenue generation perspective is still largely offline and in stores. We've been thinking a lot about how we connect the dots between how we market and then actually how we sell as well. And the past year has actually only made that, I think you could think of it as a challenge, but I think of it as an opportunity, which is that if we're already marketing to our consumers, through digital anyway, the opportunity for us to now close that and drive to conversion is now easier, simpler, and frankly, much more adopted by our consumer than ever before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, interestingly, we see we're about almost 15, 16 years old as an organization. And it's all been within digital, starting with search and then social and now kind of retail media. We're undergoing, and it sounds like, you've got your kind of core revenue of the brick and mortar that, built the business. And then, but there's this sort of rapidly scaling kind of way that you can communicate all the way down to the end consumer. Digital is sort of expanding. Obviously, we've all seen this through the last year. We kind of have a similar experience where this portion of our business that is in some ways disrupting even classic digital within search and social is starting to become more of the focus of, how we think through, you see it in our strategy to, acquire a data intelligence company that focuses in this area. How do you go and understand what is happening in real time with this market, communicate with that market? And brands want that more and more. You want to understand and listen directly to what's going on with your consumer. I think as we look at the innovation life cycle that, you guys, go through, and that you do own both kind of the marketing of that all the way through to kind of brand development and innovation, where do you seek out those insights when you're kind of trying to drive your strategic direction for branding, your go-to-market plan, your media strategy? When we chatted before, you're talking a little bit about your shave business and some of the user-generated content that perhaps helped kind of spur kind of your plans going forward. But maybe you can kind of take us through that case and a little bit around where you get those insights from.
Yeah, and just to kind of like take a quick step back, prior to being at EOS, I actually worked in specialty retail. I spent a decade at Bath and Body Works, and so my entire kind of frame of reference around where I gather insights and data from is coming from the perspective of having been part of a vertically integrated retailer. And so for me, being able to actually speak to and listen directly to consumers, sometimes literally on a one-to-one level, is yields the most amount of rich information. And I think there's nothing from an aggregate perspective that really beats just having a conversation with your consumer. And to me, that's what social media is. Like, I think of social media as a two-way conversation. To me, it's a very different thing than thinking about traditional marketing, not only in the obvious ways, but because you're getting feedback loops all the time, right? So you're getting information that's coming back to you. And if you choose to listen to it, for better or for worse, because it's not always pretty, if you choose to listen to it, you can gain so much insight about your brand and perceptions, equities, things like that. You get feedback on product, what's working, what's not working, what people love, what people hate. You get a lot of feedback, even on your marketing. We get people talking about our ads that they see and giving their commentary on that as well. And so I really do think of social listening as the gift of feedback, as it were. And so, when I think about how we've really kind of deployed that in a real way to help to kind of inform our marketing, not only our marketing, but our product. I brought up the example earlier when you and I were chatting about our shave business. And for those of you kind of following along who may have heard this case study already, what happened in recent months was just sort of a blast to work on from a campaign perspective. So we've actually had shave as a business since the beginning. Actually, shave cream, believe it or not, fun fact, was the first product we ever launched, not lip balm. So it's been around for a really long time, and I would call it a slow burn over the course of the 10 years that it's been around. And we have it in full distribution. We carried it across most of our points of distribution in food, drug, and mass. But what I started to notice, like me personally, as well as my team, is that through our social listening and our social media data, we started to pick up indications that people were using our shave cream for other things other than the typical areas where you shave. So, most people use our shave cream to shave their legs. It's predominantly women. We started to pick up men were shaving their faces. Some men were shaving like other parts of their body hair. And then the thing that started to accelerate was we started to hear that people were shaving their intimate area with our shave cream. But guess what? In personal care, it's pretty, it's actually regulated. And so areas of your body you're not actually supposed to be using the product for that haven't been tested and approved, you can't market to that. So this started to happen about a year plus ago. And we actually, in a product innovation side of things, as we're picking these things up on social media, we said, we got to get ahead of this. We have to actually start to put into place an R&D plan to get the testing, the approvals, and the ability to market to this, because we're seeing some breadcrumbs that are leading us down a path. So we did all that work. We got the approval. We're gynecologically tested at the end of last year. And then a few months ago, a TikToker completely out of the blue posts the most hilarious video with incredibly explicit directions. And I hope people will excuse my language, but basically she starts the video by saying, I'm going to teach you how to bless your effing cooch. And so she basically, that's how she starts. And it's very colorful. It's very funny. And she goes in unbelievably detailed directions on how to shave your private areas. And her TikTok goes absolutely viral, millions and millions and millions of views. And we're like, oh my God, like we have to like jump on this and seize the moment. But guess what? If we hadn't done our social listening from a year plus ago, we would not have been able to jump onto this moment. We would have had to let it go because we were not actually approved for that. But luckily we did our homework. And so what we did was then we took the product, we rebranded our own product and created a limited edition line of Cooch Blessing Cream and gifted it back to this TikToker along with a number of other influencers, as well as some of our own social media fans, and kept the conversation going, kept the campaign going. It garnered even more views. And our shave business actually doubled. Like our entire shave cream business doubled. We became the #1 shave cream brand at Target, men or women. And we're still chasing what this happened. I think it's the end of February, and we're still chasing the unbelievable amount of demand that was generated from one video. But I think that what I was saying to you earlier, Nick, was that the lesson of the story, the moral of the story, isn't jump on a viral moment. I mean, of course, that's a viral. That's always going to be a lesson for a marketer. But I think that what I took away from this story is that you have to have a framework and a discipline in place where you're constantly investing in, and in this case, investing in time, money, like mind share to really be and live on the platforms that you're living on. And for us, it's, TikTok, social media, things like that. And so we are listening 365 days a year, and that's how we pick up these things. And if it hadn't been for that, we would not have been able to take advantage of this moment.
Yeah, you can't, this isn't, I mean, you could certainly sell out of a bunch of product at a number of stores and experience a wonderful blip that maybe causes more harm to your supply chain than it does good in growing the business. Or to your point, if you're already doing the listening, you're doing the analysis, you mentioned before too, like having your always on strategy is what ensured that when that kind of, call it, crescendo happens, you can keep, the horns alive, going down the line, because you're ready to pivot and immediately bring that into your storytelling, which I think is, a really important thing, I think, for brands to think about. This is not just something that, great, I got a viral video and I'm good, right? I mean,
well, yeah. And also, I also have to say that I think that, the fact that we have made the explicit decision to make TikTok a priority platform for us, I think makes it so that our engagement with an influencer on TikTok, even for the, her organic video, it's just much more authentic. And so we're able to keep the story going much longer because we've made the decision that it is a priority for us. And so between the listening as well as the building out of our own account, and at this point now we have, I think, close to 700,000 of our own followers on TikTok, we're able to continue to have conversations with consumers directly. And actually, the amount of traffic that was referred through TikTok versus our other social channels completely spiked during this time frame as well. So we were really, truly seeing the data pointing to people going directly from these sources directly to convert on our e-commerce.
Definitely. I mean, I think you also brought up one point. What was important, you guys were already, you had the groundwork going, you saw this trend. I mean, I think your good comedic point was you need to make sure that it's legal to drink ocean spray and longboard at the same time. And then, you can take advantage of
right, exactly,
the lawsuit you might have with Stevie Nicks. But with that said, I think you guys have a really smart strategy there. And I think you start to see these technology platforms are listening too, not just you to them and their data, but they're also going, how do I create more commerce opportunities for these brands that clearly see the value of talking to these consumers? This is not just this like black and white, okay, I'm a brand, retailers is where I retail products, and sure, that's still the majority of your business. Targets are still targets. People are still, going through targets and grabbing the EOS off the end cap or in the shave aisle. that gradient is just blurring in a big way. Who is retailing the product, and ultimately, and how many more controls are now in the brand's hands in terms of talking to these consumers? It used to be, all right, I washed my hands of it, I sold it to the retailer, their job to talk to the consumer. We're seeing a lot of shift there. We're seeing those blurring lines between these social media that's are becoming shoppable. What happens if now at the end of that viral video you say buy now? I mean, that's right. that these things are happening. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you see your tactics shifting as this kind of gray area starts to to take shape in your business.
Yeah, I would say that I would say it's mostly, frankly, for a brand like ours that's already been active on actively marketing on digital and social, it's nothing but upside, right? Because if we've always been actively, spending our media dollars there anyway, but maybe before the behavior to actually, complete the transaction wasn't quite as common. Now I think with the pandemic and the acceleration of e-commerce adoption across just everyone at every age group, it's really become much simpler. And then the increased sophistication of things like being able to buy online and being able to pick up in store, and how retailers have really adapted to the new normal post-pandemic and created even easier ways for you to, frankly, for a consumer to transact on their own terms, is making it even more compelling. So I would say for us, it's been really nothing but upside, because we were spending the marketing dollars, and now we actually can have, frankly, more opportunities to convert, and more data and more insights that come out of that. I would say that the one piece that's been maybe a little bit more challenging is thinking through sort of, it's not quite the same as like old school channel conflict. Right. But there's definitely a matter of directing the traffic that gets a little bit more complicated, especially when you're a brand like us that is carried in tens of thousands of points of distribution with many amazing best-in-class retail partners that we work with. Figuring out how to manage that traffic flow is a little bit more challenging than it used to be, and I would say probably more data is great. I would say connecting the data has been more challenging for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see it a lot, focusing, the launch of our commerce business predominantly in the retail media opportunities, starting with Amazon, then Walmart, Instacart, Target. I mean, we also work a lot with large brands that are siloed in their sales relationship with the retailer, their media relationship, with traditionally digital channels that now trade spend is merging with shopper marketing dollars, digital shopper marketing. What's going on? Well, that's, I have this negotiation here as the sales team with the retailer. There's a lot that's shifting when the retailer kind of gives you more of that control, inside the, inside their business to try to communicate with that customer. Something we didn't talk about, but that kind of you piqued my interest on, and maybe I wanted to ask, given some of the types of products you have, is this kind of notion of profitability and the onesie twosies. When you start thinking about that opportunity, TikTok doesn't have Amazon's FBA program. Maybe you guys aren't tuned to have lots of onesie twosies going out, but maybe your D2C channel can handle it. But maybe you can talk a little bit about profitability. I know I'm kind of throwing you a little bit of a curveball.
No, it's totally fine. Because I would say profitability is definitely a challenge when the price points are as low as ours are. So our typical price points on lip care are anywhere from $3 to $4, just on average. And then even with our our shave, our body care portfolio, things like that, we're really now looking at more between $4 to $7, $8. So in general, with these types of low price points, we're really playing more of an add-on game than we are necessarily a single brand e-commerce transaction game. It's slightly different on our D2C. So first I'll talk about on the wholesale side of things. On the wholesale side of things, whether it's your Amazons or Walmarts and your Targets, people are able to build bigger baskets. And so adding us into that basket, it's really not, it's not a problem at all. And in fact, on Amazon, if you look back, our business has been incredibly robust for the past, year, as everybody shifted a lot of their purchasing on Amazon, because, for a lot of people not making that trip to the grocery store, the drugstore, to the mass retailer, they've been making their trips on Amazon, and they've just been adding little things into their Amazon cart. And so we've actually got, some of the top products within our categories on Amazon. If I then look at our D2C, it's actually slightly different in that our D2C is truly a destination for our most engaged fans. It's not for sort of like the casual shopper. I would say Amazon, Target, Walmart, places like that are for the casual shopper. And they're kind of adding in, it's like the virtual behavior of the cash wrap, the check lane. You know, you're waiting in line and you got to add something in to kind of like make the basket. On our D2C, what we typically see is that our units are significantly higher than I think what you would expect for like a lip balm brand, essentially. And it's because, you know, we have a broader assortment than you can find at any single retailer on our D2C, because we carry sort of our entire catalog of product. And then, you know, we often find gifting behavior. We find, you know, people who are sort of like, you know, repeat customers who are like replenishing their favorites that may have been just harder to find in at one of our retail customers. So if you think about those two things like a little bit differently, I think that the metrics and the way that you manage profitability is like very different. On our D2C, we're all about having the biggest possible catalog so that we can encourage the most amount of basket building. With our wholesale customers, we're really all about like just, you know, sort of tagging along for the ride, if for lack of a better term.
Yeah, to your point, it's not a high consideration purchase. It's that, you know, the impulse buy in the
That's right.
in the checkout. And I think some of those channels, you know, as I very closely watch, come from the Amazon sphere, I guess you could call it, over the last, you know, 15 years here in Seattle. But we're starting to see their media tools answer some of those challenges for brands like yourself, where I'm not selling the digital TV I can spend $100 selling. I have to sell a $4 product as an add-on.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily searching for the EOS. I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of brand searches, but you know, you need to be that add-on. Can I run that sponsored display ad on the product detail page, you know, next to something I know is kind of a basket built, you know, that I can be that add-on. I think their media tools are starting to
That's right.
potentially get, I don't know if you have a more specific context than that. I see it a lot across our index on lower priced products, but
I think what you're saying is exactly what we've seen as well. It's really just about sort of being there on Amazon. And so we, you know, we do have an always on sort of media approach to Amazon that basically what you just said is sort of our strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a translation of the physical into digital. And I think
that's right.
It's been fascinating to see, you know, the depth and, you know, the degree to which you can control where exactly next to the extra gum, or, you know, on like the basically the digital version of that checkout lane. Super interesting. I think, you know, we have about 10 minutes left in the conversation. I wanted to shift gears a little bit. I know one of you hear the old adage in marketing, I'm sure throughout your career, you know, at 50% of it's working, just not sure which. You know, I think it's something we're passionate about as we've evolved the digital space, you know, since 2006 as a technology partner, is measurement, right? I mean, we've seen different types of, you know, attribution, multi-touch attribution coming, you know, modeling that out. There's the nth degree has shifted over the last 15 years, let's call it. Now we're obviously at an inflection point with privacy that is potentially changing the way that, you know, we've got to think about performance marketing, let alone, you know, brand marketing across all of these, you know, disparate channels. Or, you know, when you start thinking about, to your point about, you know, directing traffic to these different channels and thinking through what is the measurement I'm going for here? How do I want to develop that traffic? It's a big sort of chewy topic that I think, you know, we're all challenged with. We have, I think, some interesting technological point of views, but be curious to get your thoughts just generally about, you know, given we've gotten a pretty good cross section of your business, what are your sort of big sort of measurement paradigms, obviously in your, you know, your engagement versus perhaps some of your paid media?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, you know, data is sort of like the blessing and the marketer's blessing and marketer's curse, I guess, because I think that we think a lot about what's measurable versus what's valuable, and those aren't necessarily the same thing, right? Because you know, if I you know, parrot back some of your words, like thinking about our performance marketing, we do have you know, a robust set of data that helps us to kind of track back the transactions and the revenues that are traceable. We're able to do that, but there's a whole host of other things that are happening in the outside world, like I said, for a predominantly brick and mortar retail brand that are very, very challenging to measure. And so we look at both our, our attribution data, as well as we also at a higher level, we look at our brand data and make sure that we're thinking more holistically about the health of our brand. Now that's a tricky one too, right? Because the piece around, measuring attribution, I think is it's not easy, but it's like relatively straightforward, because at least you sort of like know what the metrics are. If the question is like, how do you connect the dots across different platforms and different, like, different walled gardens and things like that, that's a little bit harder to do,
Right.
but at least the data is there. On the brand side, it's much more challenging to be able to map back the value of the brand and what that means in terms of what it's driving within your business. And frankly, it's probably like one of the most recurring conversations I have with any of like my marketing leader peer groups is sort of, how do you measure the value of a brand? And for us, being a brand that is predominantly, so focused on social media and social media engagement as the what really drives and fuels a lot of our audience engagement, we think a lot about, reach, organic reach and organic engagement on social media as sort of like a day in, day out, like easy, low hanging fruit kind of thing that we can look
Because
at.
there's a lot of noise in that, right? I imagine.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of noise in that. I mean, like platforms in general are all increasingly much more cluttered. They all have their sort of black box algorithms. You don't really know what's driving reach on any given platform. And so you just have to like, continue. It's a consistency game more than it is sort of like a black and white thing, because what you're looking for is you're looking for trends. You're not looking for absolute numbers. But for us, looking at the trends and trying to understand where we have particular content, we have particular, marketing campaigns that are really kind of cutting through. That is something that we look to. We do look at the reach and the engagement. Like if I use the shave cream example, that was obviously massive reach, massive engagement, and literally overnight 5x growth in traffic to our site coming from social media platforms. So there's definitely ways to connect the dots, but I think that the art of connecting the dots in the data is much more about sort of like, it's like when you remember those old drawings and paintings where you have to squint to be able to see the picture, but otherwise it's a mess of dots.
I was always terrible at that, by the way.
I was terrible at them too, but I seem to be better at it when it comes to actual data as opposed to those posters. But that's how I think of our marketing data. Is I think of things like our brand data, our performance data. I think of things like overarching, equity studies. And then I squint a little bit and try to see the insight, and sort of like derive and see the big picture versus trying to get absolute certainty on any given metric, because it's just absolutely impossible with the amount of data overload we're all dealing with.
100%. And by the way, maybe an offhanded reference, but that movie Mallrats from a long time ago, I don't know if you're a fan of it, where the guy's standing in front of that thing forever. It's a schooner, not a sail. Anyway, sorry. If any of those fans out there, you're probably with me. If not, apologies for the reference. But
I was a fan, Kevin Smith.
Okay, love those films. You did mention something that's really piqued my interest, and you didn't in our prep conversation, but this notion of like this constellation of data. And I think you're maybe getting at that with the same type of metaphor.
I like to switch up my references, Nick, just to keep you on your toes. But when we were talking earlier, I talked about our data sources being a constellation. And the reason I actually use this reference quite a bit with my team, and the reason I say that is because a constellation, whenever you see it, it has all the lines drawn between the stars, but that's not actually what it is. Actually, it's just a bunch of individual stars. And it's people who see the pictures in the stars. It's not the stars themselves. And I think of that, the data being that as well. I think you have to be the person who connects the dots, because it's what I've learned after a lot of trying is that there isn't a perfect way to have it delivered to you with all the dots connected.
One thing that came to mind for me too is you think about like looking at constellations from, I don't know, Copernicus era, and sure, it's this one perspective, but what happens if you turn it sideways? It's not the same picture. And that's something that I think, like with the technology that we have today, and it's certainly something we're passionate about, as you were talking about the way that you listen to social, you're probably, observing your brands, maybe you're looking at some competitors out there as well. We kind of are taking this, like, how do you potentially create a cube of this data? I know that's a literal term, but where you can turn it at every angle and you can join it with your own data, or you could look at it in the context of how are, key opinion leaders and bloggers comparing to the live sort of flow of reviews I'm getting on a certain channel, cloud that all up and see, oh my gosh, there's this emerging trend within, intimate care for our shave cream that you were able to capture before any, and you can also measure that against how many products are in market claiming this on all the key retailers. And you, all of a sudden you have this graph that says anything that's up and to the right here is a new emerging trend. I think that's something that we're really trying to, bring into not just like, okay, only for a brand innovator team, but also how do you then contextualize that with all of your media? What happened? Like if I knew, to your point, I'm like, maybe I want to look at a measurement of a 4 return on my spend or something like that, but all of a sudden that's tanking and you have no excuse for it. But if you've contextualized that with, that was your competitor who lost that share because all of a sudden you guys had just sucked all the air out of the room from the because someone, it's coming out of someone's wallet,
Exactly.
when you're tripling or doubling your business in shave.
That is true. That is true. I love that. I love like the idea that you have to like just look at it a different way. I mean, if you think about also the value of the brand, one of the exercises we often do is to kind of look at it in the inverse way. So one of the things with, my team was bringing to me, here are all the things that our consumers are saying they don't like about EOS. And, how do we address that? And I was like, well, if we flip it on its head, what if we also scrape for all the things that people do like about EOS, and then and figure out like how do we do more of that, how do we maximize that? And it's just a completely just shifting the frame of reference gives you a completely different set of content and data to look at.
Absolutely. I mean, I could tell you, this is just one data point, but my dog would always, because it smelled so good, would always chew those beautiful little packages of it. And I was like, so maybe that's an input where
you
develop the dog toy with the treat inside it, like
it's the thing. Yeah.
the Kang competitor there. I love it. Well, Soyoung, thank you for the conversation. I know we've run out right up against the 30 minutes allotted here. I know, Claire, there was potentially some potential for audience Q&A based on how I've been prepped for this. So happy to take questions from the audience if anyone wants to put those in, as this is basically a 10-minute window for that. And you can tell Soyoung has a lot of answers to questions. So looks like we're getting a question coming through. We've got questions are submitted. Make sure I've got them pulled up here. All right, so the first one, Soyoung, what can heritage brands learn from newer digital first brands when it comes to authentically marketing to Gen Z?
What's funny is that like I actually don't know. I think depending on who you are, like what brand you are, you would think of EOS either as a heritage brand or as a digital first newer brand, because we've been around for 12 years. And so, 12 years ago, you didn't have social media the way that you do today. And so a lot of the tactics that we're using today and a lot of our strategies are actually, they were not inherent in sort of like the original history of our brand. We were doing TV and print back then. So, I think that for me, a heritage brand, if I were to take that lens, I would say the thing that heritage brands should always be doing is taking a little bit of risk and testing. For me, I believe in testing as an always on. There's just a certain part of my budget that is always just set aside to test. Because, and that's actually how we found TikTok. We tested TikTok in 2019. And so we were kind of early to the platform. And I just find that especially with a demographic like Gen Z, they're always changing and evolving and adopting new technologies. They're evolving faster than I'm used to from like back when I was their age. And so I have to always be trying new things if I want to know where they are and how I can add value to my brand.
I think a follow-on question that came actually on the heels of it, when you talk about Gen Z, what do you see? And we see this a lot, I think, as a major trend, more, the Tom Shoes model. What's the social good that you're doing? The question is, what company values matter most to these consumers?
So I would say that our, I don't know that I know the answer to that, like just like broadly, but I would say that for us, where we're really focused is we're focused on sort of like two major areas. Those two areas are sustainability, which is such an important thing, regardless of whether you work in a business that is in the business of physical goods, but if you're working in a physical goods business, the level of harm as well as the level of just sort of positive change you can enact, I think it's quite big. And so for us, we believe that we need to be on the side of positive change. So we do things like, for example, we invest in TerraCycle, which allows for any of our consumers to recycle their goods at our cost. We invest in sustainably sourced materials. We give back to some of the parts of the world where we source our materials from, in order to ensure that we're creating sustainable communities and living. So the sustainability is one area that we really believe in, that's just sort of core to our company values and our brand values. The second area is, I would say, diversity, equity, inclusion. So it's something that's, frankly, personally incredibly important to me. It's something that I believe passionately in. But we have a very, very diverse, wonderful audience and consumer base, and they want to see that a brand reflects back who they are. And so, just as an example, a couple of years ago, we just kind of put a stake in the ground and said, at least 50% of the talent, the influencers, the key opinion leaders, just the people that we work with as a marketing team will be people of color. And that's just something that we've just held ourselves to. And once you kind of like make the rule, especially if you're a relatively small company, it's really just up to you to do what's right. So those are really our two major areas that we believe in and we believe resonate with our audience.
Yeah, I think I was asked to comment that we have a whole diversity, equity, inclusion program within Kenshoo as well. We're about 600 people globally. And to comment on the video as we rolled this out in our organization, the biggest thing that struck out for me in thinking about it was perspective. And when we talk about turning the constellation on its side, I think it's paramount. If you don't have those different perspectives, you can't turn the constellation on its side. I think it's a super good point. And I'm certainly also passionate about sustainability. I invest in a startup brand actually right now, and it's amazing to me as I review the packaging options and how much packaging is out there that doesn't even begin to touch on the opportunities for post recycled consumer goods, et cetera. And you have to be willing to bake it into your model and make that a part of your story. But I wish it were easier to find and it were more of the standard. Unfortunately,
it will be. I think it will be, because first of all, we'll have no choice. But second of all, I think that with younger consumers making it such an important part of their purchasing decisions, companies are just going to have to evolve, ours included.
Yep, 100%. Next question came through is, again, I think everyone's super keen. You seem to be the expert on Gen Z with TikTok here. How do you target this demographic in an effective way without losing, older consumer bases or alienating them, I guess?
I don't know how to answer that, because I'm not sure that we think a lot about whether we're alienating our older consumer bases or not. I think we think a lot about who we're speaking to and who is in our fan base, more than we think about what we're going to lose by the things that we're going to do. And I think you kind of, as a marketer, you have to do that, because I've heard many wise people say marketing and branding, it's all about choices. It's not, you don't get to be everything to everyone. You have to make a choice on what your brand stands for. And if it means that there are times when some folks just aren't along for the journey, that's the decision that you make. That's the strategy that you're taking. I honestly thought that this Cooch Blessing Cream campaign was going to be controversial. It turned out, literally, I can't even tell you how many comments I read in social media that said, if you make this, I will literally never buy any other product again except for this. Like, if you make this and put it on the shelves, this will be the only product I ever buy. And these are like, old, like, maybe they're not, I don't know exactly what age they are, but they are people who have their own disposable income. Right. And so I do think that you just kind of have to go with what your brand stands for and not look back.
I think that's a really smart way to look at it. Especially with that case in and of itself, I think there's a certain amount of it. We get exposed to so much content, whether it's Netflix or whether it's just scrolling through the internet, like to have a freshness of a brand, just kind of tell it like it is and not abstract what it is the product does. I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
I think there's a certain freshness that I bet any demographic would be, would appeal to, or would appeal to them. I think, so looking at the next question, we had another one about Gen Z actually again, looking at kind of what are the most effective influencer marketing strategies. I think you've touched on a few, And maybe what changes, if any, do you believe need to be made to influencer marketing trends to better appeal to Gen Z?
I think that, I'm just going to speak from our example, or our experience. I think that for us, where we've had the most success, like true measurable success with influencer marketing, has been when when it's an authentic relationship, as opposed to, kind of typical SponCon. And so we've actually seen, through like measuring and having, sort of some influencers that we've worked with for quite some time and had longer relationships with, and other influencers that we've brought in, who are, maybe more like just for a specific campaign. We've seen that the level of engagement and the level of sort of positive, relevant, conversation, all of these things, which are actually measured, are significantly higher and stronger for influencers that we've worked with and who are more authentically part of the EOS family. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because it means that they're kind of coming along on the journey. You're working with influencers because you want to be able to, reach their community, right? And so reaching their community, the people who opt into their community are there for a reason. They're looking authentically towards this influencer to share their world, share their advice, share their opinion. And so the more real and authentic the brand partnership is, the more likely that community is going to be to kind of like opt in to the dialogue. And so, for example, we run an annual campaign called the Flavor Lab campaign. We just launched it about a month ago. And in the first year that we ran the Flavor Lab campaign, which, we typically work with, influencers to not only market it, but to co-create the product line. We saw anywhere from 2 to 4x engagement rates for the influencers who had co-created and were along for the journey, versus the influencers, many of whom were exactly apples to apples in every other like KPI, who came in just for the launch to be able to amplify the launch of it. So, we really believe in sort of more authentic relationships. I also think that the shave cream example is another really great one to show that the authenticity of people kind of giving your brand like love, on their own. It just goes so much further.
I like I said, I mentioned before maybe we'll wrap because I think we're up at time. I'm being notified here, but I've been in the Amazonosphere for a long time, and I've seen this evolution of